everybody. Welcome to Self-Help Books When You Need Them Most. I spent a lot of time in the self-help aisle over the years, both as a book editor, a book coach, and a consumer. During the pandemic, I decided that I would walk every morning and I listened to inspirational, motivational books. Two of my favorites have been Let Your Fears Make You Fearless by personal coach Koya Webb and Radical Acceptance by psychologist and mindful meditation teacher Tara Brach. With the development of coronavirus, book sales overall from January to now have shown an impressive growth of 6% compared to the same time last year, according to NDP research. I know two of the things that have helped me push through the COVID challenges are great books and Netflix. Can you relate? So today we're going to look at some of the new titles and 5 of the authors that have created them. We're going to hear some prepared remarks from each speaker, and then we're going to open it up for discussion with everyone. Our first speaker today is Anne O'Brien. The first time I encountered Anne, she was a keynote speaker for a spiritual expo, and we both lived in LA at the time, and I encountered her off and on over the years, and then she moved away to Colorado. So I was really pleased when a publisher that we both know recommended that she contact me to help her with her book and become her editor. Mm-hmm. That title, A Woman's Guide to Conscious Love, Navigating the Play of Feminine and Masculine Energy in Your Relationships, came out in February. Anne brings a background as an intuitive healer, coach, and teacher of practical spirituality and empowered living to her new role as an author. I feel she shares unique and special insights to relationships in her book. And O'Brien, I am so pleased to have you here today. Please go ahead and share your prepared remarks.
Thank you, Robin. I remember it was like 2006 or 7. You came to some of my workshops and you're like, I want to edit your book. When you write your book, I want to edit. And it was like 13 years later or so that you finally, through our mutual friend, ended up editing my book. And here's the book for anyone curious. Let's see. So A Woman's Guide to Conscious Love was birthed out of partly my work with my clients. I've been in business since 2004, working especially with women. I work with men and women, but most of my clients are women. And their biggest challenge in life is their relationships typically, or the biggest thing they're focused on and they want help with. And I was noticing a pattern where on the one hand, women were blaming men, they were criticizing men, they were complaining about men. On the other hand, I'm lonely, I can't find a good man. Why isn't he showing up better? Why is he being like this? I'm like, that's a recipe for disaster. So somebody needs to address this. And I wrote the book to address how women can get what they're really yearning for, and at the same time to empower them. Like there's something a woman can do to attract a great relationship. There's a lot of things we can do, and also to bring out the best in the masculine in an era where there's a lot of bashing of the masculine. It's like, no, wait a minute, women want that. And so I also wrote it from my own personal experience as a teenager. This was always an area of my interest. Instead of doing my physics homework, I would be figuring out astrology charts for the boys I had crushes on or the boys I was dating. And I was reading tarot cards and I was trying to understand because I was feeling so much that I couldn't make sense of. And I ended up doing about 10 years of intuitive training, clairvoyant training, energy healing, mediumship. And I learned to really understand that so much of the energy I was experiencing wasn't mine. And there was a way I could work with that and use that as a gift instead of as something that took me down and overwhelmed me all the time. So putting all this together of seeing in practical life what women's relationship challenges were with my understanding of energy, and there's a lot of dynamics at play that a lot of people aren't talking about. So there's a lot of great relationship books out there, and a lot of it is more external of, here's how you dress and here's how you act and here's what you do on a first date and here's what you say or don't say. And I was like, but nobody's really talking about the energy part, and that's something that I've really spent my life exploring and mastering, I hope to say. So also in my personal life, I have been through a lot. I've dated, I've been married, I've been divorced, I've had a child. And between that and 16 years working with women, I just felt that I had a lot of things I had seen that worked or didn't work. I ended up self-publishing this book after exploring it was first book, my first time writing, and I wanted to get it out there. Kind of by the time I got it done, I wanted to get it out quicker. And I had some great coaches, you, Robin, some other people that have written books and advised me that this is really a great way to go for today's author, that we can, as self-published authors, have more of our creative voice and retain more of the money. And I was already marketing myself anyway through my business. So felt like the right path to me. And it's really, because the message is about empowerment for women, I'm hearing a lot of women say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize like a strong woman isn't passive. You can be strong. You can be strong, but not push like a man. A lot of women that I encounter that want a relationship are like, but I'm strong, I'm a feminist, I'm a great catch. Why don't they want me? So learning how to both soften, but also expand into more of your dynamic self as a woman. And you can be feminine, but not passive. You can be strong, but not pushy. So that's been something people have really been inspired to hear. And then at this time on the planet, you mentioned, Robin, how a lot of people are reading more books these days. Yeah, I think whether somebody just has more time on their hands because they were home a lot in the spring especially, or couples stuck in the house together and all their issues coming to a head and, oh my God, I have to figure this out, right? Or people that were not in a relationship and yearning for that. I think this was a good time to release the book, and little did I know. I also see my book as a celebration of life force, so in the light of this era that is bashing the masculine, and there's a movement to neutralize gender. And I find that while my book is about, we all have it all within, we all have masculine, feminine, we all are whole within, it's not about going numb. It's the opposite. It's like, whoa, here's the riverbank. And the river is the feminine, this dynamic flow. And the masculine is the riverbank that holds her in place. And they're very different, and their qualities in nature. It's not about gender, but yet it is about polarity and living fully. And in this light of everybody's locked down and afraid of getting sick and all these restrictions we're feeling, I want to celebrate life force. I also feel like at this time, we don't know who to trust anymore. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of tension. So being able to teach people, like, you have intuition, you can find what's true for you, no matter what you're hearing all out there. And also you have a way to balance your energy. And my book is also a workbook. So it goes into a lot of exercises for specifically guided meditation, how to ground yourself, how to clear other people's energy, how to release your own past trauma, old stories, ancestral patterns, past relationships, exercises to manifest what's right for you. And I think at this time on the planet, we need to be doing this. And it's a great time to be creative because so much has been destroyed or changing. We can use this as a great opportunity. So I think I'll finish there. Thank you again for having me.
I was going to ask you what you think women don't get about themselves, but I think you covered that. What do they not get about men, do you think?
That most men are actually very sincere and want to do well and want to make them happy, and that most men are hurting too and have a lot of their own challenges. This is a time where we're all wounded. We've all been hurt. And a lot of the movements I see are about reacting to the wounds instead of really getting to the root of the wounds.
Okay. So we're going to talk more about COVID and your book later. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. I think that he is so right on for this topic of self-help books when we need them most. He is Stephen Joseph, author of the forthcoming A Grown-Up's Guide to Effective Crankiness, the Crankosaurus Method, which will be published in December or January. The pressures of the coronavirus and all the restrictions have certainly made us all a little cranky at times. And fortunately, besides being an author and an attorney and a negotiator and mediator, he's also a humorist who can help us see the lighter side of crankiness. His last book, The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Toronto Crankosaurus, won a Mom's Choice Award. Welcome, Stephen Joseph.
Well, hi. Thank you for having me. So my story is a little bit different. I had no plans on writing a self-help book. And before that, I had no plans whatsoever of writing a children's book. I wasn't even thinking of it. I am an attorney. So around 2010, I was the chair of the dispute resolution committee for the section of the American Bar Association. And back then I put together a book on negotiation for the ABA. And around 2017, 2018, I started playing with the book on LinkedIn, putting out different chapters, like articles on LinkedIn. So, oh, this is really good. And then I started writing a lot more legal stuff on LinkedIn, a lot of different articles, law-related articles on LinkedIn. And then it was 2017, actually. I was in Rome with my girlfriend, who I've been with for about 8 years, and I was married for 20 years. So what happened, she was having this sort of a meltdown. The electricity, we had like a Airbnb type place, and the electricity was going out right at the time she was coloring her hair. Like there's like black stuff.
Not good timing.
So she was getting really cranky about like a lot of different things. So finally, it just came out of my mouth. I said, "You're like a Tyrannosaurus," and she's like 100 pounds. So I said, "That's probably how all the dinosaurs died." There was one little tiny dinosaur who kept cranking out a saurus, and saurus is like Yiddish word for problems. Oh, I have so big problems. So she was cranking out a saurus, and all the bigger dinosaurs couldn't take it anymore, and they all dropped dead. So that kind of
very cute
brought a laugh to her, and after that, we kind of noticed that used the word crankosaurus. Like, I have this crankosaurus. There's no word for cranky, so we created this word crankosaurus. So it's like, I know, like, there's this thing in me. I have this crankosaurus, almost like, I'm about to throw up, sort of thing. Like, so if I'm about to throw up and I'm in your house, I would say, like, is there a bathroom somewhere? Just you would say, no, Steve, I have this antique rug. It's very nice. It's beautiful. Why don't you do it on the rug? And by the way, there's a Picasso. You could do some on that too. You would know. You'd say, push me to the bathroom, please go right away. But we crank out. We do the cranking out whatever on each other, on people we love very much. So it's a more mindful way of thinking about it. And giving it a name. So having a name, Crankosaurus, it's like, okay, I have this thing in me, and it's not like I'm saying. People always say what you feel. Like, oh, I'm angry, and people say, oh, he's so good at saying how he's angry, but Steve is a really angry person. This way, I'm not. I just have a Crankosaurus in me. I'm not angry. I just have this thing, this Crankosaurus in me, and how to manage that. How to effectively manage that crankiness. So, what happened? And I run a lot. I'm a marathon runner, so I was out running, and this dinosaur story came into my head a few months later. And after a few beers, drinking a few beers, I typed this story, and I was reading it out to people, and people laughed, and then I decided to make it a kid's book, how all humans evolved from the Tyrannosaurus and the Tyrannosaurus. And then of course the last picture is like love, like the planet with babies and everybody's crying. So it's like our true nature. So again, I didn't plan on writing this self-help book, but you get these reviews, and somebody wrote that I didn't talk enough about overcoming our crankiness, and that got me really worked up. It's like, what do you mean, it's about embracing our crankiness. This is who we are. The infection rate is 100%, and there's no real vaccine for it. So yes, I started writing a blog at www.thelastsurvivingdinosaur.com, and things kept flowing, and had Crankosaurus lawyer, Crankosaurus doctor, Crankosaurus kryptonite, Crankosaurus meditation, barking up the wrong tree, Crankosaurus, can of worms, Crankosaurus. so I kept writing and writing.
You're on a roll. Let me ask you,
Yeah.
did you find a publisher, or did you decide to self-publish? How did you publish your book?
That's another funny story. I was going to self-publish.
Are you talking about your first book?
No, the first book was with Mascot Publishing. So I actually went with a publisher, and it actually, you could write one nice thing about that is you write a story. The great thing about the publisher is they gave me about 80 illustrators, and I could pick and choose. Like after 80, I pick the 3 I like the best.
That's fantastic.
And then from the 3, they gave me a lot of their work. And finally, I went with Andy Case. I really thought his style matched what I was thinking in my head. And each picture, I would describe what I want, and he got it like perfectly right. So that was great. And then I decided, well, this is not a kid's book. I might as well self-publish. And then Archway Publishing contacted me, and they're part of Simon and Schuster, and I thought,
wonderful.
So since they're part of Simon and Schuster, I thought, well, that's interesting, and there's a lot of things I could do with that. So I ended up going with Archway Publishing, and it actually turned out to be really good because I was already in the process of self-publishing when there's 25 chapters. By the time I was done, it became a 40-chapter book. So
can you give us a tip on overcoming our crankiness?
Overcoming? No, I not.
Well, how do you suggest we approach our crankiness?
Well, first of all, giving it a name, and just with like empathy and mindfulness. I think it's really about a lot of that. So again, by having it in a name, and also saying that it's a common crankosaurus. Like we have the common cold. Why? Because we might have 1 or 2 a year. Common crankosaurus, you might have 3, 4 a day. So just to understand, it's something that is common. It's a common crankosaurus. So I have this crankosaurus, and creating space for it, a safe space for it. Whether so it's not like if I have a crankosaurus, you're not taking it personally. It's not about you. It's something I have, and you can be more compassionate to me, and also it's just when you're cranky, I'm not just like.
It's like the crankiness isn't the total person; it's just a part of them. I think the mindfulness piece is really important because sometimes I find myself being really wound up, and I'm triggered. I'm ready to be triggered, and I have to say, "Whoa, wait a minute! I have to get myself in a better place." So we want to hear more from you, but we need to move on to our next speaker. Thank you very much, Stephen. Sure. Next up will be Michelle Thorne, whose new book, Authentic Diversity, How to Change the Workplace for Good, was just published in September by Routledge. Michelle is the founder and CEO of Inclusion Nation, where she works with business to create inclusive spaces. She believes that authentic diversity lies at the heart of workplace success. In addition to all this, Michelle is a TEDx speaker who has delivered presentations from 30-minute keynotes to day-long retreats. Excited to have you here today, Michelle Silberthorn.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I loved writing this book. I love sharing this information with everyone. You know, people always ask me why I started writing. And I tell people I've been writing this book since I was a kid. In my yearbook, my quote is, "Be who you are and say what you feel. And the people who mind don't matter, and the people who matter don't mind." And I know it's something a kid would say, so it's probably not as relevant as now, but like part of me still holds on to that. And I believe that if we lose that authenticity, who we are, that fundamental truth of our lives. In one of my favorite books, V for Vendetta, it's that single inch, that inch of integrity that we have, then we lose out on so much more. And the pain and the anguish of constantly having to put on a mask and entering spaces that hurt us and entering spaces that we hurt, and the resentment that results from that, right? So there's all that feeling about when you lose your authenticity. But then there's also the recognition that when it comes to the workplace, we have leaders who do not understand how to navigate that. And we have leaders who do not understand how to equip their companies and their employees with the skills to recognize if you want to hire a diverse workforce, that's great. But let them be diverse, let them be different, let them not have to keep on putting on this mask of assimilation. And when you throw your hands up in the air and say, gosh, I can't find any talent, I'm looking at you and saying you're recruiting pretty diverse talent. But here's the thing, you aren't keeping them because they're leaving after 3 years, after 4 years, after 5 years, because they know that they don't belong. And they know that they don't belong. And when they know that they're not, invited to the right conversations and leaders aren't looking out for them and they're not speaking up their names, and when issues of bias and race arise, they aren't going to stay. And so the work that I ask people to do in this book and through my website, michellesilverthorn.com, you can learn all about that there, but all the speeches and traveling that I used to do with the speeches I still do, is to really equip people to understand how to actually run a diverse workforce as is in fact diverse. So when I talk about in my book, I talk about these 2 rules, the old rules of diversity and the new rules of equity, because my goal is to get to inclusion, to get to that space where, I can be a part of your workplace and I can succeed with my values and my differences and my talents and the richness of my connections and my networks. And how are you going to do that? And that's what I'm trying to do. And so I know one of the things that we had talked about was how I got started on this. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for many years. And then I worked for the Illinois Supreme Court, and I would travel around the state of Illinois and I would do a lot of diversity trainings. That's how I got started in this work. And one of the things I recognize is that people just want tools. Give them tips, give them something to do, right? You can talk all day about the theory behind everything, but give them something to actually put into place and actions that they can take. And so that's why I started writing this book. I submitted a couple proposals to a few publishers. Taylor and Francis Routledge were the ones who got back to me. At the same time, I had the TEDx talk that I got picked up for, and then I started my own company, Inclusion Nation. And so all of that was November of 2018, and it just has not stopped. I mean, if you are listening to this and you have a book in your heart, please go write it, because the world will not stop for you. So if you want to just take it on and go for it, that's what you should do. So I'll tell you a little bit about my book, and then, I'm happy to answer questions later on. But how the book is organized is over that shoulder. You can see it there. Is that there are 5 old rules of diversity and there's 5 new rules of diversity, right? So our 5 new rules of equity. And so our old rules of diversity are things like, we only make the business case, right? Just talk about how much people are widgets and how much, money they can make, right? That's all we have to do. And we can say things like unconscious bias and, bias is fine and everyone has it. But we don't talk about how much it cuts people down and how much it hurts and how much it prevents someone from succeeding, someone who is equally talented and qualified. And then we have this, especially in the States, I grew up in Jamaica and Trinidad, so you realize it really when you're an immigrant, is that Americans don't talk about race. And it's been especially cognizant this last, 4 months when we have had to talk about race. And so many of the people I've talked to and many of my clients simply are not equipped to have that conversation. They don't talk about race with their kids. They don't talk about race at work. And one of my old rules is you got to talk about race. Else, what are we even doing here? And then after that, I talk about we don't all start at the same starting line. We all start at different starting lines. This belief that everyone enters our companies, that we are all the same and you just onboard people in a week. That's not true. And then the last part is that this culture in our organizations includes everyone. It doesn't. It never was intended to. It was never designed to include someone like me. I mean, I was never in the room where the values were set out. People like me weren't even allowed in the room. And so you go from these old rules into the new rules of equity, creating a space where leaders can center their diversity on people, not on the business case, and a space where we actually, work on what does our data show us? What do our numbers show us? What are the goals that we are trying to achieve for diversity? Where we build a community for our marginalized employees, where we sponsor them and champion them. We speak their names in rooms where they're not allowed. And then finally, and this is the most important part when it comes to authentic diversity, creating spaces where people can be allowed to bring their authentic selves and to not have chaos, because everyone's like, oh, authenticity just means chaos. No, it means a space where you share your values with me, I share them with you, and then we work together to create a space of success and that I can belong to. And that's what I'm asking people to do. And the response has been tremendous. I mean, it has been amazing, especially, not just this book, but this whole movement about creating spaces where we talk about the real issues when it comes to equity and inclusion. So it's been the joy of my life to do this work. And I will say this again to anyone who is listening, feel free to buy my book. I would love if you did. Buy everyone's books on this panel, but go write something that's in your heart, write it, because you might not know whose lives you might change when you do.
I remember one time I was shopping for a car and I was at a dealership where everybody was people of color. And I was talking with them and they all had college degrees or even a lot of them had master's degrees and they were selling cars. And I was amazed, that they weren't able to do more.
Yeah. I mean, it really depends on when you think about what are the barriers to success when people talk about equity and when they talk about, leaning in, right? That's a great example of a self-help book that's all about leaning in. It's not that they're not leaning in. It's not that we aren't doing the work. It's not that we don't have the degrees or the qualifications or the background. We are just, impaired by all these systems that tell us that we're not good enough and we're not competent enough and that we're never designed for people like us, right? So if you really want to think about how we are going to make this diversity and inclusion matter, then take a look at your own life and take a look. One of the exercises I have people do is a self-reflection on who are your peers? What books do you read? Who are the authors on your book, on your shelves? When you think about why you can't talk to your kids about race, what are your kids learning from how you talk about race or how you live in your own life? Is your life actually diverse? And so that's what I really want people to think about when we're doing this work.
That's a big piece of it, the home environment and what they learn. Thank you, Michelle. I need to move on. One of my areas of specialty as an editor is health and well-being. So I was delighted to find our fourth speaker, Patricia Payton. She co-wrote Physical Intelligence, Harness Your Body's Untapped Intelligence to Achieve More, Stress Less, and Live More Happily. It was published by Simon & Schuster. You've heard of Emotional Intelligence. It was written by Daniel Goleman. It was a New York Times bestseller. And Physical Intelligence, the authors explore the idea that understanding how our body influences our reactions and actions can help us perform better in life. And this is right up Pat's alley. As a business consultant, Patricia Payton has dedicated her 30-plus year career to helping teams, people, and organizations reach their next level of excellence. Welcome, Patricia Payton.
Thank you, Robin. It was interesting, this transition for me from that corporate consulting around leadership, sales, negotiations, some similarities with some other people on the panel here, to working with organizations around physical intelligence. And that happened when I met Claire Dale, my co-author. Claire has a background as a dancer and choreographer. She had her own contemporary dance company in the UK. And at a certain point, when the dance company grew and she needed a board and was raising money, she realized that the way that she prepared to go on stage also prepared her to go into the boardroom, and that a lot of people in business didn't have those same skills. And then through a colleague of mine, a long-term colleague and friend of mine, met Claire and said, Pat, I have an amateur background in dance, voice, stage performance, in addition to all of that consulting work. So she said, Pat, you used to dance. Is Claire onto something? And I looked at some of the content and I said, absolutely. I know that I use these techniques. I've used them my entire career. I used to work for a very challenging woman who would really honestly yell at a lot of us all the time, but she was brilliant and the work was fascinating. So I just used my dance techniques, my voice techniques to manage that environment. And so I decided to join Companies in Motion, which is the company that Claire had founded. And Claire didn't have a background in instructional design, but I do. So we were able to work together to build that curriculum out and then build that business. And in the course of doing that, we were already teaching people about physical intelligence and coaching them to use physical intelligence, to develop it and use it. We realized too many people have no idea what we're talking about. So unless you have a background in sports or the arts, and particularly acting, singing, dancing, a lot of people haven't been really present in their bodies, and they don't understand when we share some of these techniques. So we wrote the book to help increase that understanding and also to give credibility to this thing that a lot of people labeled as fluffy. And we know how important it is and how it actually drives business outcomes in addition to your own personal peace of mind and ability to perform. So we decided to write the book, and we were in the process of deciding self-publishing. Do we look for a publisher? And there was a bit of kismet in that Claire was out walking her dog in the park right around the corner from her home and ran into someone who was a retired publisher who also had a dog, and the dogs were playing, and they just struck up a conversation. And that gentleman introduced us to one of the top book agents in London. And then we ended up in a bidding war for the
How
book,
wonderful.
which was, completely unexpected because I've written my entire life, but neither of us had published. So we ended up going with Simon & Schuster, as you mentioned, and then we worked together to write the book. And it was just a fascinating experience, just the co-authoring process. And it also enabled us to bring physical intelligence out, not just to these corporate clients, but to everyone, because we know that physical intelligence is relevant for every human being on the planet. We've gone to other book festivals and people have said, is there something like this for children? How about for teens? Can we use it with infants? That last one we're still working on, but absolutely we can use it with teens and with children. We would love to write the children's version of it. So, and in terms of why it's relevant today, it's always relevant. In fact, we know that physical intelligence doesn't just sit alongside our cognitive and our emotional intelligence. It actually underpins them. I picture it like Atlas holding up the world, where physical intelligence is Atlas and cognitive and emotional intelligence are that globe, because the stronger your physical intelligence, the better your cognitive and emotional intelligence will be. And conversely, if you're not thinking about your physical intelligence, then you're really not going to get the most out of that cognitive and emotional intelligence.
I want to jump in here. I was looking at your book page today on Amazon, and it was talking about how our bodies have so many functions going on. 1 trillion functions every second. Wow.
Correct.
So I'm wondering if you can just give us a few snippets of some of the practical things in the book that are physical intelligence that you resonate with the most.
Sure. And why don't I just talk about what's been resonating in the world we're in right now? So there are 4 elements in physical intelligence: strength, flexibility, resilience, and endurance. Strength isn't this kind of strength. It's inner strength, confidence, resolve, appropriate risk-taking, driving change, speaking wisely and decisively in those pressure-filled situations. Flexibility is all about creativity, innovation, collaboration, agile thinking, adapting to different styles, back to the diversity that Michelle mentioned, right? How do we communicate in a way that adapts and recognizes what's unique about each of us? And then resilience is just what you'd think: bouncing back from disappointment, challenge, maintaining a learning mindset, maintaining optimism. And endurance is sustaining that effort over the long haul, patience and persistence. We need all of those right now, whether it's the pandemic, social unrest, the political divide, fires, floods. We are absolutely overwhelmed with pressures from outside. So with strength, I'll give you 2. This is where we start. And I say all the time, do not confuse simple with unimportant. But the first 2 things we need to do to build that strength is work on our posture and our breathing. And what people know, I mean, if you had a mother anything like mine, you were told to sit up straight. And if you ever took a voice lesson, you know how to breathe. And if you meditate, you know how to breathe in a paced way. But what you might not know is the way you sit and the way you breathe is actually changing the chemical composition in your body, the balance of these chemicals.
We're going to sit straighter now.
Yeah. So we, as you said, trillions of operations every second. This is an amazing piece of technology. Instead of outsourcing it to the Apple Watch or the Fitbit, get in touch with the messages that your body is sending you. And also what people are finding very interesting is connecting how we breathe, how we move, how we think, and how we interact with each other to the chemical makeup within our body. And that's what the book does. It gives you, the book has 80 techniques. There are literally hundreds of techniques in real life around physical intelligence. We're developing more, we're doing more research that we connect to. If you're feeling this or you want to feel that, here are some techniques that you can try to reduce your cortisol, boost your oxytocin, your dopamine, your serotonin, our 3 feel-good chemicals, how to make sure that acetylcholine and adrenaline are in balance, because acetylcholine balances adrenaline. And if we can do all of that in a very thoughtful, mindful, strategic way, then we can manage all of the stress of the world around us, deal with that uncertainty, and drive ourselves forward.
Thank you very much. I love that this started with preparation for acting, because I can remember working on that, getting in the right groove to go on stage and do a performance. That's wonderful. We'll talk more. I'm going to move on to the next person. I've saved someone special for last, which is something that one of my mentors, Erwin Zucker at the Book Publicist in Southern California, always does. This is Ivy Slater, author of From the Bar to the Boardroom, that's BARRE, Choreographing Business Success Through Authentic Relationships. Her title reflects her own journey from dancer to successful business owner, as a printer to successful business coach. One reader described her book as full of practical business advice shared through examples and personal stories. Another said it offers the successes, pitfalls, and challenges along the way to building successful businesses based on authentic relationships. Ivy is a business coach, speaker, author, and podcast host. On her podcast, Her Success Story, she interviews gutsy businesswomen on their compelling journeys toward achieving success. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Ivy Slater.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for having me. This panel has been outstanding. I have wanted to sit here and take notes and notes and notes from so much wisdom. So I'm different than many here who I've been driven to write. I've written my whole life. The Bar to the Boardroom, Choreographing Business Success Through Authentic Relationship, I had 100% resistance to write. I swore I would never write a book. I'm starting on book number 3, but I swore I would never write a book. This isn't for me. I wasn't a great student growing up. I wasn't a reader growing up. I was a dancer. I scrunched in that little bit of homework when I had to, as long as I can go dance. And what Patricia was talking about with your breath and your alignment is so important. I have to say, what drove me to write this was my clients who kept showing up and saying in all the work we were doing. I've been in business with Slater Success over a dozen years. And I was like, they'd be diligently taking notes. I'm like, I'm the coach consultant. I'm taking notes. They're like, no, I have to capture this. And they drove me to write this book. And they kept saying, how did you get started? You make sales look easy. You make running a business look easy. And I said, I've never really looked at myself as a great salesperson. And they're like, how could you say that? You sold over the 25 years as a business owner, millions and millions of dollars worth of various things. And I said, and I would think about it and say, I do people really well. I really adore people. I love to listen. And I ask some great strategic questions. And then I just really lean in. And then I ask another one. And they're like, can you teach us how to do that? And can we document that? And it was, also years of keynoting and training and coaching, consulting, that I finally kind of threw my hands up, not for a better way to explain this, and say, okay, fine, I'll put it down. Then people saying, well, what about your story? How did you start in business? And I said, well, when I started out in printing, I was told to go hit the street and bring in sales. And I was like, okay, great. Where should I get started? And they're like, well, the yellow pages or the pavements. Pick one and go walk. New York. And I was like, really?
Walking the pavement in New York works, though. I've done it myself.
And it does. And this was back in the day before there was security in buildings. This is the true when the elevator pitch was developed, because you used to walk into the Chrysler building and smile at somebody and say, oh, what floor are you going to? They're like, oh, I was like, where do you work? Right. And we used to do this. What I found more effective for me was actually picking up the phone and calling everybody. I was in corporate events and catering before that. And I spoke to my old boss. I said, listen, I'm a printer now. I'm just going to call everybody that I've worked with and that I've run their events and that I was the liaison for. And we worked with Goldman Sachs, and we worked with ABC News, and we worked with Columbia Business School, and, top tier organizations. And I would just call them up and I would say, hey, it's Ivy. I changed careers. I noticed the last time I was at Columbia, you had all this printed material everywhere. Who could you introduce me to? They're like, oh my goodness, come on down. I'll walk you down the hall. And it was always the value of relationships that I built businesses from. When I opened Slater Success in 2008, it's not the greatest idea to open your next business on the beginning of a recession. And what I just did is I called all my printing clients, hey, I'm going to be opening a second business. And they're like, well, you're still going to run your company? I said, of course. But, my kids are getting older. I have more time on my hands. And I've always been passionate about. And before I knew it, people would pick up the phone and say, how's that other business is going? I'm thinking of leaving Hearst Publications and opening my own marketing firm. Can I have a conversation with you? And that's the value of true relationships. In the back of the book, I also believe in a lot of the books and a lot of the material I write and a lot of the videos I do of having an assignment, something that somebody can immediately take action on. Because I think it's vitally important to not just talk about things, but allow people to implement immediately. So in the back of the book, there is a great exercise that I give most of my clients when they start with me. And it's so simple. Just write down everybody you know. Tap your brain. Who's in that high school Facebook group? Who did you go to college with? Who did you go to law school, since we have a few lawyers on the panels with? Who did you get your master's? Did you get a certification program? Where are all these people today? And have you spoken to them recently? Who are the people in your last job, your job before that? Are you involved in any religious or nonprofit organizations? Who are your colleagues and contemporaries there? When's the last time that you picked up the phone and said, how are you doing? How are you doing 2020? How's this pandemic? How's your family? And reach out from a place of not sales, but I care, checking in on people, asking what's new in their world and what they can use that you could be a resource for them at. When my clients got very nervous came March and April, and one of my sweet spots is our attorneys. I'm like, is this going to be a recession all over again? And I was like, let's start creating these call lists. And I said, reach out to X number of people a week. And they're like, well, what do you want me to say? I said, ask them how they are. Ask them how they're dealing. Ask them how their company is navigating it. Ask them how their kids are. Ask them how their parents are. Come from a place truly of I care. And through that, true relationships are the golden ticket to success.
Thank you, Ivy. I really think our relationships in business are what make it fun. The
Exactly.
people that we work with and helping each other and not being in it alone. Tell us a little bit about your podcast and how that got going.
Her success story has been around. We're finishing our third year of podcasting. It's a journey of and stories of amazing, gutsy, and successful women and a few brilliant guys along the way. Because we do, as Anne was saying, we need both sides of that coin. We must see the whole circle, the whole plethora of diversity. In that way, it's 30-minute interviews with great content, great insight. We're about to be moving into what I do every year, which is near and dear to my heart, of a series around nonprofits and social impact organizations. When we look at the holidays, it's important to give and receive, and what better way to give than to highlight organizations that continuously give forward.
Where do people find your podcast?
We're on all major platforms. It's very simple. If you go to slatersuccess.com, under Insights, you could find her success story, my blog, as well as tons of video content.
Okay, wonderful. I want to hear from each of you in the light of the time of the coronavirus. What is a main message from your book that is helpful now? And whoever wants to jump in first. Stephen? You need to unmute yourself. What's the message? I think crankiness is an important thing to talk about in the time of coronavirus. I know I've been cranky.
Well, there's a lot of main messages, and there's a lot of stories in my book. And one of the big themes is empathy. So like one story I tell is the story chapter is called Barking Up the Wrong Tree, Crankensaurus. And there's my next door neighbors. I tell two stories in that chapter, but one story is my next door neighbors, the barkers. And they're the kindest, most generous people around, but they used to be the meanest and stingiest people in the entire town. And the reason was you walked by their house, you could even hear it. It was woody and maple, and the kids, birch and willow. And wherever, you could always hear them yelling at each other, "You're barking up the wrong tree. You're barking up the wrong tree." Everybody was just saying, barking up the wrong tree. If you need some help from them, they would say, "You're barking up the wrong tree." Until one day, they lost their voice. They couldn't speak anymore. And so they went to their doctor, who sent them to a birth therapist, which happens to be barking up the right tree therapist. And after a few weeks of practicing how to bark up the right tree and be the right tree to bark up to, their voice came back. So they were, so that being able, again, in this time of COVID, and you're feeling like you're barking up the wrong tree.
It's channeling that energy in a way that
it's a negative energy. So just that empathy part. Another thing I like talking. I love when I get to do my lawyer stuff, and there's something that we all. I think in this society we do something that's where we think of things in the counterintuitive way, which is wrong, and then we think of something in the intuitive way, which is wrong, and I flipped it over. So I deal with lawyers all the time, and one of the phrases, and we talk about this in society, you have to fight fire with fire. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So I went to the firehouse, and I went to the firemen at the firehouse. I want to know, what kind of high impact explosives do you use to put out the fire? Like you save the premium unleaded only for the big fires, or could you use it for the small fires too? And believe it or not, they told me they use water. They use water.
Wow.
They use water. So the thing about it is, like, I always ask lawyers when I work with lawyers, and it's just, I think in life, thinking, what's your water? What is your water? There's a lot of fire around, and what is the water? The other piece, lawyers, again with lawyers, lawyers like to argue. We're going to argue this, and we're going to argue that. We're going to argue this, we're going to argue that. And I always say, arguing takes away your power, because 99% of the time when you're making an argument, somebody already anticipates that argument. You get no value for that argument. Not going to tell them something. Oh, I never knew. This is
trying to sound like the smartest person in the room rather than trying to work something out with another person. Okay, I think we need to wrap up because we're running out of time. So I want to give everybody a chance to just quickly say their message. Anne, you want to go next? What message do you have in the light of the coronavirus that would be helpful to people?
I talked about it a bit earlier. I think maybe I got mixed up about what was happening when. But anyway, as I'm thinking about it now, I think everything out there that we're seeing is a reflection of something within. And if what we're seeing out there isn't something we like, we can do something about it. And that's a lot of what I teach in my book, is the intuitive skill sets, whether that means releasing what you're trying to process that's not yours, whether that means grounding in the light of the tension, whether that means clearing some old stories so you can see the present accurately, whether that means recognizing, where the other person is at that you're not able to sense. So I love really helping people with intuition right now. I think it's critical right now. And I wanted to mention too, I have an intuitive training program that's 6 months long starting November 9th. So that's at AnnaO'Brienliving.com/intuition. But I think it's a great time where a lot of people are wanting to go within and are wanting to understand how to get in better alignment.
I think this is a great time for doing that, because we're spending so much time by ourselves working at home. So we might as well get to know ourselves better and improve our own relationship with ourselves. Thank you, Anne. Michelle, this is such a timely part of our lives for your messages. What what message would you like to share with people? And share your contact information also, please.
Sure. You can find me. I'm at michellesilverthorn.com. You can always find me on any platform you want, at In With Michelle, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. This has been a time where we are talking about race, and a lot of us aren't equipped to have that conversation. So let's get equipped to have that conversation. We have time on our hands. Some of us do. And then some of us are busier than we have ever been in our entire lives, and we need to take a breath. I will also add that last month, 1.2 million married women lost jobs, whereas 1 million married women lost jobs and 1.2 single men gained jobs. This is a tragedy that is going on right now. And a lot of Black and brown women are suffering the most. So if we can pivot so quickly to turn to remote learning and turn to remote work and turn to all of this in response to a pandemic, then we got to step up as leaders, every single one of us, whatever teams or organizations that we are being a part of, and figure out if we can fix this. What is it that we can fix? Because there's an emergency going on. And we need to be rallying the alarms and sounding the bell that we cannot have this workplace stay the same it was 100 years ago when, again, people like me weren't even allowed in the door. So that's my message to everyone. We've done it for some of it this year. We got to keep going.
Thank you, Michelle. Patricia, what message from your book would you like to share in the light of coronavirus?
Sure. Well, first, I'll give you my contact information, because in addition to the book, we have a blog and a podcast. You can find all of that at companiesinmotion.com. You can join our community, where every week we give you a new tip or a link to relevant research, another article, because the field continues to grow. The neuroscience is always happening, the neuroscientific research. So join our community. We don't share your email, of course, but every week, Monday, you get a new tip. So coming up, The Chemistry of Fear is coming out right before the election, and The Chemistry of Optimism the week right after. So please do, and follow me on Twitter at Payton_Patricia. Would love to hear from any of you. And you can reach us to get coaching and training anytime. Beyond that, I would say the key message is, however you're feeling, it's okay. All emotions are chemical reactions. Emotions are strands of neuropeptides. They arrive at these receptor cells and create this chain reaction. But with physical intelligence, you can control how you're responding. And again, very simple movements. If you're feeling stressed, work on paced breathing with a longer out breath, and that will reduce your cortisol, release some DHEA and some acetylcholine. That's the number one thing. If you're feeling isolated, reach out to someone. If you're not feeling isolated, but you haven't heard from someone in a while, reach out to them. Give them oxytocin. If they're not getting oxytocin, their cortisol is going up. All of these chemicals live in balance. And with certain simple techniques and a protocol, just as Ivy said, right, we're going to teach you to build a protocol so it becomes a way of life. It's habit stacked into your day.
Thank you, Patricia. I know no matter how busy I am, I try to walk in the morning because it just puts me in the right groove for the rest of the day and burns off stress and gets me in the right mindset.
And it also will release your that's going to increase your creativity and innovation. And we need new ideas more than ever right now. So that's a wonderful practice.
Ivy, what is the main message from your book you'd like to share and your contact information?
The most important thing the book talks about is the value of relationships. During this time, during 2020, and this experience of living through a pandemic, we need relationships. People need people more than ever before. Open your hearts, open your minds, listen with your whole body, and reach in and learn and grow together. That's the greatest gift we can all take forward. Learning more about me, go to slatersuccess.com. There's all kinds of resources there. There's a video to download on 7 Traits of Great Leaders. You could download a free chapter of The Bard of the Boardroom. The resources are there. The choice is for you to start jumping in. Make this your best year yet.
Thank you, Ivy. And Stephen, you did not share your contact information yet, I don't think.
I have a website, www.thelastsurvivingdinosaur.com. Under construction is www.stephenjosephauthor.com. That should be up in maybe in a month or so, but you can always find me on the last.
Okay, and my contact information is writingandediting.biz. And I want to say stay safe, stay strong, and stay well.